Tapi aku kurang paham apa itu fintech lending nih. Kelebihannya apa dan gimana proses pendaftarannya?
Fintech lending itu adalah platform layanan jasa keuangan yang mempertemukan pemberi dana atau lender dengan penerima dana atau borrower. Jadi, melalui platform itu, borrower bisa mengajukan pembiayaan dan lender bisa memberikan pembiayaan serta mendapatkan imbal hasil. Nah, kelebihannya ada di kemudahan akses, Sam. Nggak cuma lewat smartphone aja loh. Ada fintech lending yang juga bisa menjangkau masyarakat yang belum memiliki akses layanan keuangan formal.
Tapi untuk mulai investasi di fintech lending itu pasti mahal ya?
Enggak kok, investasinya bisa mulai dari 100.000. Nanti kamu bisa cek langsung di website atau aplikasi perusahaannya.
Wah, menarik banget ya Nit. Aku bisa langsung cek dari smartphone nih.
Kalau begitu, gimana caranya biar dapat pembiayaan untuk modal usaha baruku nih?
Langkah pertama, kita bisa dapat nama-nama perusahaan fintech lending berizin dari daftar yang dikeluarkan OJK. Penting sekali untuk memperhatikan legalitas perusahaan. Bisa juga WA ke OJK di nomor 081 157 157 157. Dari situ, kita bisa mulai masuk ke website atau aplikasi perusahaannya. Kemudian kalau bingung dengan banyaknya layanan, kita bisa pakai agregator yang berfungsi membandingkan layanan berbagai fintech agar kita bisa memilih sesuai kemampuan.
Oh, seperti agregator yang dulu kamu jelasin untuk pilih asuransi itu ya Nit?
Iya, Vin. Beberapa marketplace dan e-wallet biasanya juga memiliki fitur untuk masuk ke perusahaan fintech lending. Oh iya, untuk tetap memastikan keamanan dan kenyamanan penggunanya, fintech lending banyak bekerja sama dengan penyelenggara inovasi keuangan digital atau fintech lainnya, Sam. Misalnya nih, eKYC digunakan saat verifikasi pendaftaran. Saat pengajuan dana, inovatif credit scoring digunakan untuk menganalisa data supaya konsumen yang belum punya riwayat kredit atau rekening bisa tetap dapat pembiayaan. Untuk perlindungan, perusahaan fintech lending bekerja sama dengan penyelenggara layanan insurtech. Untuk alat pembayarannya, bisa menggunakan e-money langsung dari smartphone kita. Pada saat pembayaran, otorisasi dilakukan melalui layanan payment gateway. Gitu Sam, Vin.
Wih, sekarang fintech makin keren ya Nit. Tapi beneran aman nih kalau kita pakai layanan fintech lending seperti itu?
Aman Sam, asal kita perhatikan beberapa hal, yakni cari perusahaan fintech lending berizin di website OJK dan lihat apakah track record perusahaan cukup bagus. Teliti lagi syarat dan ketentuan layanan masing-masing. Cek juga ada tidaknya perlindungan data pribadi konsumen dan layanan konsumen ya Sam. Tapi ada satu hal yang penting diperhatikan nih. Pastikan lagi kalau kita benar-benar mampu membayar saat mengajukan pembiayaan ya. Nah, dengan tahu tipsnya, kita sebagai pemberi dan penerima dana bisa lebih bijak menggunakan fintech lending dengan aman.
Jadi jelas ya, SMS yang Sam dapat itu termasuk fintech lending ilegal.
Iya, Vin. Fintech lending ilegal hanya memberikan dampak yang merugikan untuk lender maupun borrower loh.
Wih, ngeri banget ya Nit. Tapi, kalau kita nggak bisa menghindari hal itu, kita bisa lapor kemana nih?
Iya tuh Nit, kalau mau lapor kemana?
Kalau kasusnya terkait perusahaan fintech lending ilegal, bisa lapor ke OJK. Sementara, jika ada masalah dengan perusahaan berizin, kita bisa hubungi layanan konsumen perusahaan tersebut atau lapor ke AFPI, AFTEK, atau OJK.
Oh begitu Nit, thanks ya. Aku jadi belajar banyak tentang fintech lending. Sebagai alternatif pembiayaan modal usahaku, prosesnya mudah, cepat, dan tanpa agunan.
Iya Nit, thanks ya. Aku jadi makin mantap untuk mulai melakukan pendanaan di fintech lending. Sistem keamanannya handal dan bisa dimulai dengan nilai rendah ya.
Sama-sama Sam, Vin. Yuk buruan cek fintech lending, solusi tepat untuk rencana keuanganmu. Menguntungkan, aman, dan user friendly loh.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the event, please allow me to inform you several rules for this event. Firstly, all panelists and participants must log in using their full name and the institutions they are representing to. All attendees video will be turned off and the sound will be muted during the event. Should the attendees have questions, please raise the questions via the Ask a Question button. And please do not close your sessions or log out during the event, as you can log out after the event finishes. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. We are proudly present Indonesian Fintech Month webinar in the topic Innovation POT of Sharia Fintech. What's more business model to come? Ladies and gentlemen, please let me introduce myself. My name is Kartika Sofia Aprianti, and I will be the master of ceremony for this event. Today, we will be having webinar with the topic, Innovation POT of Sharia Fintech, What's More Business Model to Come? With panelists, Association Hamad bin Khalifa University, and also Islamic Fintech Working Group Co-Lead Global Impact Fintech, Dr. Dalal Asoli. Inclusion Working Group and Western Europe Chapter Co-Lead, Global Impact Fintech, Dr. Oriol Caudevilla, Chairman, Association of Fintechs in Kenya, Exco member, Global Impact Fintech Africa Chapter, and also Executive Board Member, African Fintech Network, Mr. Ali Hussein Kasim. General Secretary, Indonesia Sharia Fintech Association, Mr. Muhammad Ismail. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed the webinar, which will be moderated by co-founder and Global Board Chairman of Global Impact Fintech Forum, Mr. Malikan Kotadia. Please allow me to read his short bio. Mr. Malik is a globally recognized digital banking expert, fintech mentor, futurist, acclaimed author, and fintech faculty. He has been recognized as a global thought leader at various forums. He is also currently co-founder and chairman of Innovation Labs, a global fintech consulting and venture growth company. It has worked with connects progressive banks, cutting-edge fintechs, and policy across the globe. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, Mr. Malikan Kotadia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kartika. Terima kasih. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening in whichever part of the world you're looking in from. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome to the Indonesia Fintech Month. On behalf of the Global Impact Fintech or GIFT Forum and our executive committee, I am delighted to support OJK and the Indonesia Fintech Month once again this year. And this time we have the pleasure of having brought to you Islamic Fintech experts from all over the world who will share what's happening in the world of Islamic Fintech and Islamic finance, including innovative and cutting edge business models and opportunities. And we have presentations from each one of our global expert speakers, after which we will have a panel discussion on some of the most important topics of the day. And finally, time permitting, we will have about 5 to 10 minutes for audience Q&A. So that will be the flow of the session today. And for me personally, it's a delight to be back here. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I'm not able to travel to Jakarta. We are doing this event online, but it's always a pleasure to speak at OJK events. So thank you, Patriono, thank you, Kartika, and the entire team for your unstinted support. And without further ado, let me invite our first global expert speaker, one of the best known fintech voices and experts in the Eastern Africa and the Africa region, Ali Hussein Qasim. Ali, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone, depending on which part of the world that you are in. My apologies, just want to confirm my presentation.
Yes, Ali, we can see you. Please go ahead.
Great. So today I want to talk a little bit about the Islamic fintech opportunity in Africa. And there is a lot of similarities with what is happening in Indonesia. The one thing that struck me as I was listening to the video just now, which was in Bahasa, I think, the Indonesian local language, I couldn't understand much, but what I could understand and what I picked up several times was fintech lending, fintech lending, fintech lending. So, you know, I was gratified to know and to feel that I was within a fintech community, and the common word was fintech. So I want to quickly go through the opportunity as far as fintech and Islamic banking, Islamic fintech is concerned in Africa. But first, let's look at the situation. The African banking industry basically failing the African population. Very low penetration rate of financial services in Africa, despite mobile money penetrations, which is averaging about 36%. And despite the huge gains in the microfinance industry. Low customer satisfaction. This is something that we talk about every day in my native country, home country of Kenya. Low penetration of financial services denies African youth enormous entrepreneurial opportunities. Now, the reason why we are zeroing on African youth is that Africa has the largest youth population in the world, 200 million aged between 15 to 24. That is way back in 2012. By 2045, this will be 2 times. However, if you look at the savings account penetration rate, that's only 12% of the population. And this is specifically key in Africa from a socio-economic perspective. The youth with very little hope from an economic perspective, number one, are migrating a lot. Very many of them are migrating into Europe and other countries. Number two, unfortunately, we are seeing Islamic radicalization because of the lack of opportunity. So fintech is a key component of turning around this conversation. The situation today is very simple. And Africa, 50% of Africans are Muslims. Now, the first time I heard about this statistic, that actually shocked me as an African myself. I had no idea. And yet it is a very underserved Muslim market. 24% only have a bank account. By 2030, 60% of Africans will be of Muslim faith. 40% of Muslims have a strong preference for Islamic banking products over conventional banking. So the market is ripe. Yet, Africa accounts for only 1.6% of global Islamic finance assets. So, financial services players in Indonesia, Africa is open for business. Market opportunity. Again, we're still talking about the Islamic market niche. Muslim versus non-Muslim. 24% of Muslims have bank accounts as opposed to 45% non-Muslim. Huge growth potential. Low barriers to entry, conventional banks, business models anchored in non-Islamic banking models. There is hardly, apart from the Northern African and Western African side, most of the African continent offers little or none or no Islamic banking models. Fintech is a great solution to the limitations of Islamic finance, both from a cost and a complexity perspective. Africa is the second largest market for mobile payment in the world. Let me give you a very interesting statistic. In my home country, where Kenya is the home of M-Pesa, which is the global recognized leader in mobile money, 1 in every 10 human beings that uses mobile money regularly is a Kenyan. Now, step back one little bit and consider that statistic. 1 in every 10 human beings in the world that uses mobile money regularly is a Kenyan. We are only 50 million Kenyans. The world is 7 billion people, yet 10% of all mobile money transactions in the world are actually done by Kenyans. So we have a huge propensity for fintech kind of products. Agency banking, I'm not sure whether you guys understand what agency banking means, but let me just quickly explain this. This is basically about leveraging on third-party infrastructure and cash flows. So you have all these small little retail shops in the African continent and in the East African continent especially, which we call dukas. I'm not sure what you would call them in Indonesia, but these shops have now become a hotbed of fintech innovation. With a small little device, whether it's a mobile money, rather whether it's a mobile smartphone or even a feature phone or a POS machine, that small little shop is being turned into a deposit or withdrawal platform for most banks in Kenya. So this is a huge opportunity. And to just give you perspective, Equity Bank, the largest bank group in Kenya and the Eastern Central Africa, has especially moved into this space. They collect in agency banking billions of dollars every month. This is a huge opportunity for small players to leverage on this already existing low infrastructure. The market opportunity, again, small niche markets, millennials and Gen Zs, macro entrepreneurs would be the most important target market niche across Africa. And of course, the African diaspora is huge. Even with the pandemic last year, we saw more than $40 billion flow into Africa from the diaspora. What are the potential product offerings? Your traditional Sharia compliant deposits, saving accounts, zakats, accounts, tontines, trade finance, murabaha, buy salam, this FMCG, that's fast moving consumer goods, agricultural inputs, light industries, construction, real estate, transportation, and logistics. Housing finance is a good component of Islamic finance offering. Agricultural equipment, housing, mortgages, retail, leasing, which we call ijara, That includes agricultural equipment, construction, light industries, commercial transport, and logistics. Current accounts, debit cards, no fixed charge, but fee per transaction. Value-added services, money transfer, of course, is huge. That lends itself very well with the mobile money movement in Africa. Participative finance, equity-based financing, which includes quasi-equity products, murabaha, savings accounts. What is the customer looking for? One of the things that we have come to realize and appreciate across Africa is, irrespective of your customers' financial and social standing, everyone is demanding the same high standards in how financial service organizations treat them. Hence, the only way to execute that is through this device. The name of the game in Africa is around omnichannel. So please disassociate yourself from digital-only banking. In Africa is about omnichannel. It's about all present, everywhere financial services. Agency banking, mobile and physical branches, they are all a part of the banking ecosystem in Africa. But here is another interesting component of financial services in Africa. Pay-as-you-go water metering, pay-as-you-go solar power, TV on demand. This is becoming super important across the African perspective of financial services. Of course, agency banking is a critical component. And then you've got the whole other, your normal loans, payments, and the rest of it. What's the ideal ecosystem? What's the ideal business model for Islamic banking in Africa? One, a business model that enables rapid deployment and profitability. So yes, investment bankers want to see traction. They want to see continuous growth. But in Africa, eventually what we are saying is if we don't see profitability now, at least we want to see what I call P2P, path to profitability. So a business model that gives you a clear path towards profitability. A participative customer relationship model, customers who participate in building the products and services. A digital platform that is designed to reduce fixed costs and infrastructure investment. Cloud-based digital banking platform that lends itself very well to the omni-channel conversation. And you've got to build around your customer. Last but not least, on my slide, I want to talk about the new financial services rules. The majority of Africans do not use typical payment methods. So if you're coming into Africa and you're thinking cards, news for you, only 15% pay with typical international cards. And this number is very skewed. This number lends itself mostly to the wealthier African states, the South Africans, to some extent, Egypt and the North American component of it. But most sub-Saharan Africa is much lower. In my country, because of the success, in my country, Kenya, because of the success of mobile money, payment cards only take 2% of all payments. So this is very important to take note as you look at this region. I want to stop here and hand it back over to Malik. I'll be around to answer a few questions. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Ali. That was an excellent and also a very insightful presentation for me personally as well. Lots to learn about Africa. So thank you for not only bringing us
You're
some
welcome.
interesting Islamic fintech models, but also bringing Africa to Asia. So you've acted like a true spokesperson of Africa. Thank you for that. So from Africa, we
Thank you,
move to
Malik.
the MENA region, and we are delighted to welcome another expert who is an academic and a scholar in Islamic finance, and also co-leads our Islamic fintech working group at the Global Impact Fintech Forum. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Dalal. Dr. Dalal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Malik, and pleasure being in this event. And thank you for Ojeka to initiate this very insightful event. So looking forward to the session. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, maybe you can make it.
We can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so
Dr. Dalal, just a thing, can you make it larger or full screen? Because I can only see it in part of my screen, so I don't know how it is showing on yours.
Sure.
This is better. Thank you. Please go.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll be talking about a very specific segment within the Islamic financial industry. So I think the Kenyan experience is definitely very interesting, but looking at the global landscape, where fintech-driven innovations are influencing significant parts of the financial industry, but specifically talking about the capital markets, that applies to, again, the whole value chain from sourcing capital to data and analytics services. And then with focus areas being automation, data analytics, intelligence, but also customer satisfaction. And another emerging area, which is looking at the impact assessment of capital market transactions, especially when it comes to social and environmental impacts. Now, for that, few technologies are actually used, and these include, for example, advanced analytics, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, smart contracts, blockchain, robotics, and also the digital transformation in general with advanced analytics, which is important for decision making. Now, looking at the global landscape, when it comes to Islamic fintechs, there are about more than 140 fintechs globally. And if we see the breakdown, and this is from the latest reports, which is the Global Islamic Fintech Report 2021, which estimates the global fintech transactions at least at the OIC countries to be at 49 billion US dollar. This is still a relatively small percentage as compared to the global fintech industry. It's only about 0.7% in terms of volume. But this growth, this volume is expected to grow to 128 billion by 2025 with a compound annual growth rate of 21%. And that is a very high projection rate as compared to conventional fintechs, which are only projected to grow by 15%. And in that index, actually, the report shows a bit the progress on about 64 countries globally when it comes to Islamic fintech, and ranks Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Indonesia, and the UK as the top 5 strongest ecosystem when it comes to Islamic fintech. However, what you can see here from the breakdown that most of the solutions are focusing on, in a way, deposit and lending, payments, raising funds through platforms such as crowdfunding platforms, wealth management, and relatively less solutions when it comes to the capital markets and also to social finance. And this is very important to consider, perhaps looking at the developments in the coming years and also leveraging on some of the challenges that are facing the global financial industry, specifically thinking about the pandemic, but also all the commitments that we have seen under the climate change agenda. We now just had the COP26, and also previously we had the SDG agenda, and then the commitments under the Paris Agreement. Now, if we look at, this is the index, and then the Global Islamic Fintech Index is different than GIFT, the association. So it's very interesting that we have the same abbreviation. But we see that Indonesia actually ranks 4th because of the various progress that has been done in terms of the ecosystem. And that shows that when it comes to the readiness in terms of a conducive ecosystem, which has been highlighted multiple times whenever talking about the challenges that face fintechs globally, there are several ingredients to promote actually the expansion of fintech across the various sectors when it comes to these 4 countries, including Indonesia. Now, how do we scale up the capital markets at the same time? How can fintech pretty much support that target, which is actually a common challenge to a number of Islamic finance jurisdictions? If we look at, broadly speaking, the Islamic financial industry, we have the Islamic banking segment representing around more than 70% of the industry. And then after that comes the sukuk market with, depending on the years, with about 19-20%. And then the other segments that are still relatively underdeveloped is the Islamic funds and, of course, the Islamic insurance, or the takaful. Now, moving forward to leverage on that, Islamic fintech could be a very good enabler to promote the development of Islamic capital markets at the global level, but that is taken into consideration, of course, more innovative solutions across the, whether it be in Islamic funds or the sukuk market, and also sustainability integration. And know that Indonesia is one of the pioneers in terms of coming up with the enabling frameworks to promote sustainability integration at the financial industry level, with various, of course, policies and frameworks. We've seen recently the green bond and sukuk framework that allowed Indonesia to issue its first sovereign green sukuk, and also with guidelines to support sustainability integration in the Islamic financial industry. So for that, actually some of the solutions that can be developed, one of the key segments is, of course, the sukuk market, which is still underdeveloped. Specifically thinking about corporate sukuk, most of the sukuk issuances in the region or in the country are driven by sovereign issuances. And we see relatively less corporate sukuk pretty much in Indonesia. And the reason for that is that corporates still rely on bank financing. And if we compare, in 2020, there have been about 2.4, I think, issuances. And if you compare them to the corporate sukuk issuances in Indonesia, it's more than 100 billion. So that's relatively high when it comes to tapping the corporate sukuk market to finance or to provide liquidity and funding for corporates. And we know that the increasing funding requests post-pandemic, etc., for a number of corporates, that will also promote, providing enough sources of financing for Indonesian corporates. And that's a common challenge. It's not only in Indonesia, but we do face, for example, the same challenge here in the region. And the solutions for that is to provide more incentives for corporates to issue and use a sukuk, but also that could also apply to some of the regulatory incentives also to promote sukuk for liquidity management, etc. Now, in terms of financial innovation, how can that be leveraged using fintech? We've seen the development, for example, of smart contracts, and that leveraging on the issuance of sukuk on blockchain. So we've seen e-bonds and then, of course, e-sukuk. We have, I think, relatively one experience in Indonesia, but there are other platforms. There's a platform in the UK, but also in Saudi Arabia, trying to develop digital sukuk platforms that will allow, again, more issuances or incentivizing corporates to issue more so they can use the platform rather than setting up their own platform for that. And then it could also contribute to promoting the liquidity of the market and providing alternative sources of financing for corporates while helping develop the capital markets in general. That also applies to sovereign issuances, even though we said that so Indonesia in 2020, for example, was the second largest issuer of sukuk. However, that could be further expanded into looking at some other models using, for example, as we mentioned, e-sukuk or leveraging on blockchain technology, but more issuance when it comes to SRI, green sukuk, and we've seen a new other asset classes looking at some other social aspects with some innovative solutions that also build some synergies together with the Islamic social finance sector that today in several countries, both segments operate separately. So the ingredients for that is, of course, a conducive environment. We've seen the development of sandboxes in several regulatory sandboxes to promote the development of fintechs. Also, clear legal and regulatory framework. There's also importance of developing partnerships, and that could be also across the various segments of the Islamic financial industry with fintechs, a win-to-win relationship, I would say, between also fintechs and Islamic banks, and also engaged customers. And here it is very important, if we want to leverage on these trends to promote Islamic capital markets, is to also think about targeting a growing investor base, which is impact investors. And I mean, before this, in the past years, we have seen this investor base growing in Europe and then in the US, and of course in other conventional markets. But we see more and more in Islamic market, more investors who look for the impact of their investments, and therefore they require more impact reporting and then traceability and transparency when it comes to achieving environmental, social, and governance objectives. And finally, access to talent is very important, because that's some of the challenges that face the digitalization, if we want to, of the financial industry. That's one of the main challenges, that if you want to promote more digitalization, more innovative solutions. We spoke about integrating sustainability, leveraging on some of the technologies like robot advisory or blockchain or AI. That requires the right skills and right talents for that, and that's a major role that can be facilitated by academic institutions in order to revisit their programs, to integrate more programs that align with the needs of the industry, but also leveraging on these trends. And broadly speaking, when we look at the Islamic Finance Development Indicator, this is a report that just has been issued by Refinitiv that looks into the development of the industry, looking at, of course, various indicators, including the quantitative development, knowledge, governance, awareness, and CSR. We see also Indonesia ranking second. And that comes, of course, with the significant progress made when it comes to awareness, when it comes to knowledge creation, governance, and also looking at the quantitative development specifically when talking about the capital markets. We see that in terms of top countries in sukuk value outstanding, and this is mainly, as I mentioned, due to the sovereign issuances, Indonesia ranked third. However, we see that Islamic fund assets under management are still relatively developed. As I mentioned, it's a global at the global level, it's still an underdeveloped segment. And this is where we could see also some of the innovations when it comes to technologies like robot advisory, but also more ESG issues and more diversity in terms of the asset classes of funds that could be looked at. And this, of course, could be leveraged on the development challenges of the country. Among them, of course, if we look at the enabling factors in the context of Indonesia, there's a large Muslim population. There's a fintech ready generation. We've seen that during the pandemic with more who require more fast and competitive solutions, a conducive environment when it comes to the enabling framework, the government support through the various policies that have already been issued, whether on fintech or also when it comes to sustainability integration, and also that a lot of these actions are reflected in the master plan to develop the Islamic financial industry, which is a very good enabler itself. And now moving forward is really to mitigate on the national development priorities when it comes to mitigating climate change, but also the recovery post-pandemic. And some of the challenges to promote the post-pandemic recovery is to focus on really some of the challenges faced during the pandemic and really into the preparedness and the readiness for countries to deal with pandemics. And a lot of countries, of course, at the global level had identified key issues when it comes to food security, it comes to climate change, when it comes to SMEs. A lot of SMEs suffered significant losses during the pandemic, and capital market solutions, leveraging on fintech, etc., could promote alternatives when it comes, for example, to these SMEs. A good solution could be, for example, developing more Islamic venture capital funds that support Islamic fintechs and therefore could to help them scale up their operations and support the development of the Islamic capital markets. And of course, we've seen some of the innovations, as I mentioned, the ecosystem is there because Indonesia has the experience of issuing sukuk, and one of the key innovations that could be further scaled up to promote, again, to raise more financing for development projects and then post-pandemic recovery solutions is the use of cash waqf linked sukuk, which already has been done by the country. Now to do it also to open it to retail customers and further green and SRI sukuk, focusing on more asset classes. We've seen examples in Indonesia targeting education, targeting vaccination programs, facilitated by the World Bank. That's for example, the IFM Sukuk through the Gavi Foundation. And then, of course, when you're talking about other solutions, as I mentioned, targeting the health sector, the education, food security, so more solutions for SMEs, women empowerment, agriculture, and more synergy, especially with Islamic social finance. And again, we still see that there is a confusion when it comes to promoting solutions targeting Islamic social finance. It's not only about charity. You can perfectly develop very competitive solutions that target the development of Islamic capital markets, who are also providing innovative sources of financing for social finance institutions. And we've seen models of sukuk for waqf, and also using what we call social impact bonds, and that is using a KPI mechanism to incentivize service providers to deliver services for the community. Now, focus areas, of course, as I mentioned, robot advisory. You have solutions for portfolio management. We have seen very successful solutions for robot advisory, and now it's even extended to Sharia robot advisory, which is a bit controversial, but why not? I mean, we are living in a very fast-changing world, and of course, there's a new normal, so why not also thinking about Sharia robot advisory moving forward. Digital progress services, investment platform, and then, as I mentioned, sukuk trading platforms, which are very important to facilitate and promote corporate sukuk issuance, and then more solutions for small business financing, and of course, more analytical tools to promote transparency, traceability, and of course, impact assessment. And I'll stop here not to monopolize the discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dalal. I think in 15 minutes, you have covered so much of Islamic fintech. You've given an entire global overview. You have spoken about social finance, innovative models, opportunities for the future, and weaving it together with the capital markets. So truly scholarly work and presentation there. Thank you for being able to summarize all of that in about 15 to 20 minutes. And now with that, let's continue and come closer to home. We are delighted to welcome our third speaker, who is obviously very well known to our community here in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, Pa Muhammad Ismail, who is the General Secretary of the Sharia Fintech Association of Indonesia, and most likely needs no more introduction than that. So without further ado, let's give a very warm welcome to Pa Ismail, and the floor is yours.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so this is the landscape of Sharia finance industry in Indonesia. So pardon me, this some of this presented in Indonesia, but I need you to see at the corner, right corner here. So you see that the contribution of financial or Sharia financial in Indonesia is about 10%. It comes from banking industry and capital market, Sharia capital market, and non-bank industry. So you can see the market share of Sharia finance from banking is 6.69%. The non-bank industry included like fintech, insurance there, appointed for 4.25%. And the capital market has the market share at 17.03%. In total, so financial Sharia or Sharia financial in Indonesia contribute 10% of the total financial industry in Indonesia. Okay, this is the detail. You can see here from the non-bank sectors, industry, you can see that we have 9, this is data by June 2021, we have 9 fintech Sharia. Okay, so this is contribute, the Sharia sectors contribute only 0.25%. This is quite very small compared to the potential market that we have. We know that Indonesia is the highest or the biggest Muslim population in the world. Okay, and then how the Sharia fintech compared to non-Sharia ones or conventional fintech? So we have, in terms of number of fintech players or fintech company, we have only 6% from total fintech company in Indonesia. Okay, and this is to see the detail about the Sharia finance. We have a glad or good news here that the banking Sharia asset is growing bigger compared to conventional banking. The Sharia banking growth at 15.87%, and the lending growth at 7.38% compared to conventional banking at 0.23. So we see that the growth for Sharia is bigger compared to the conventional banking. Okay, this is some of the data that the digitalization in Indonesia. We see in the banking industry, the spending on API integration, we are at the rank as 11. So we see that within the ecosystem, every company, every business, every element within the industry are thinking about how to integrate their technology to provide the more productive and efficient solution to the market. And the second thing is the rise of artificial intelligence can also boost the business ability to build the decision, especially in financial approval and payment channel. And the third, we see that the cloud technology, the software as a service, innovation and companies also growing. I am also running a SaaS company here. We see during this COVID, something that we might see within the next 5 years is crunched into only 2 or 3 months. So with the growth on adoption of SaaS solutions also growing rapidly in Indonesia. Okay, and the fourth thing is the customers also would like to communicate the digital business providers. the enterprise. So this is drive the enterprise. The business should transform or vary its core system to be the digital platform. So we see that the banking industry in Asia Pacific, they're spending on digitalization. They rank at the 12th. And then, as mentioned earlier, that we need to improve the customer experience on the market dealing with the financial services. Okay, so this is the business model that currently exists in Indonesia, but like the earlier video before this about started, we see like fintech lending. Yes, this is one of the most popular cluster, P2P lending in Indonesia. And we have also payment, clearing, and settlement. We have equity or securities crowdfunding. As Dr. Dalal mentioned earlier, this is one of the solutions for SME funding. And the fourth, we have digital finance innovations under OJK. This is a regulatory sandbox, so it gives us as a player a space for innovation before OJK or the regulators provide specific regulation for one or two kind of business models. Okay, so this is one of the business model that we have or rising in Indonesia, the securities crowdfunding. Actually, it's launched by 2020. Sorry, this is mistaken. January 4, 2020. OJK has launched a securities crowdfunding business service. So this is some achievement. By 21st December of 2020, there were 126 publishers who collected the fund through the equity crowdfunding, reached 178 billions and 37.2 thousand of investors. So the securities crowdfunding, it works like more close like a capital market, but for small SME. So it has their own association, ALUDI. It was estimated that would be a huge amount of electronic project or procurements with the Indonesian government, which would cost over 74 trillions by 160,000 SME enterprises. Okay, so this is more about securities crowdfunding. So what is securities crowdfunding? This is actually the service that effect offering, which is initiated by the publishers to sell its effects directly to the investors, sell their shares directly to the investors through the open electronic networks. So the securities crowdfunding roles is to provide, manage, and operate the crowdfunding service by the effects offering based on the information and technology utilities. And what is the effect? Actually, this is the share, we're selling shares, the valuable papers such as the debt papers, commercial papers, including sukuk, collective investment contracts, temporary contracts of effects, and every derivatives transaction of the effects offering. Okay, so this is the digital finance innovation. This is one of the department under the OJK. This is the regulatory sandbox, and we have several clusters here: aggregators, financial planners, blockchain-based. It goes into this department: credit scoring, insurtech, online distress solution, RegTech, insurance broker, financing agent, EKYC, funding agent, project financing, and so on. So what's more business model to come? This is the key drivers that we see might improve or pushing the fintech Sharia to the next level. So this is the key drivers. We see the demography shift of the millennials and the Gen Z are more than 60% of the national population. This is close to what we see in Africa. So you can see that the Gen X and millennials is it's close to 50% of the population. Okay, and the majority of the Indonesia right now, millennials have been engaged to the internet, which is about 98.2% access to the internet through smartphone. So everything as smartphone first. So seeing this fact, there are competencies that needs to build the digital transformation by the fintech companies, such as we need to improve the business model, the capability building, leadership, product and services, marketing and promotions. Okay, this is the Sharia literation and inclusivity. You can see here, this is the literation gap between conventional and Sharia. Even though we have the largest Muslim population in the world, but still we have a literation gap around 28.79% on conventional compared to Sharia. And the inclusivity gap is 66.18%. So this is far way smaller Sharia compared to the conventional one. So we still have a lot of things to do to increase the literation about the Sharia finance, Sharia economy, and especially what is fintech Sharia. Okay, so this is the interesting fact that by 2020 was a defining year for fintech funding in Indonesia, with over 113 deals covering a total of 3.3 billion investment. This number represents around 42% of total value of foreign direct investment to Indonesia and 7.7 billion. As part of the new economy chain and digital economy system, the fintech and e-commerce industry has made a positive contribution to national economic growth by attracting more investment to Indonesia. But the question is, even though we have that big of investment to fintech, we see that very small part of it goes into the Sharia fintech. So the majority of population in Indonesia are adherents of the Islamic religion, which is certainly very closely related to the Sharia system. The consequence of this condition is Indonesia, its principle, has great opportunity to develop Islamic finance, especially in the form of digital finance innovation. So in addition, this is also supported by the development of financial technology in Indonesia, which is currently growing and spreading, thereby increasing public demand of Sharia-based financial technology industry. So this is the three pillars that we think to drive innovation and business model in Indonesia. So if we are talking about fintech in Indonesia, currently, most of the people who already are familiar with fintech, they know, fintech lending or the payment system. That's it. Okay. So we still have issue about the literation from the market side. In my opinion, actually, our work needs to give more information to the people, especially in Indonesia, the noble values of Sharia economic system. We do believe that this Sharia economic system teaches people to be honest, to avoid greed, fraudulent transaction, and excessive transaction, as well as not to harm others. So through this, we believe that it will change the behavior of people, and of course, it will change their financial behavior. Okay, and from the business owner perspective, from the business perspective, we see that a lot of business or C-level still doesn't have any information or detailed understanding about what is fintech, how fintech can help their business, and what is fintech Sharia. what is the difference between Sharia fintech and the conventional fintech. Okay, and the second point, we see that the government, in our opinion, what FCC, that a government is already doing their job very great. Since we see the president, Bapak Jokowi Widodo, currently we have the National Committee on Sharia Economic and Finance, and OJK also have their part doing pushing the fintech Sharia into the next level. But we need to work closely together to move forward from the regulation and driving the market, pushing the literation. And the third thing is, we see that with this big population in Indonesia, we have that complexity to solve. So we need a lot of new startups in fintech Sharia or Sharia fintech to solve some specific problems. Those problems might raise a new solution that might raise the new business model. So that's what we need to do currently. We need to concerted efforts between how we manage the market, how we're dealing with the government, and how we push the innovation through the startup business. Okay, so this is the ecosystem of Sharia financial in Indonesia. We have the commercial finance. We have like banking, Sharia banking. We have OJK here. We have all the government sides here. We have social finance for zakat, infak, and sadaqah. We have the specific halal industry, like food and beverage, fashion, halal tourism, halal cosmetics, halal media, and other business Sharia. And here we have like the full talent, research, regulation, branding, and building the awareness and technology. So this is the whole ecosystem of our financial Sharia financial in Indonesia. Okay, so I think this is all, Mr. Malik.
We certainly do not want to reduce the time we will give to our last but not the least speaker, our global expert on blockchain, digital currencies, and CBDCs at GIFT. It's my pleasure to welcome all the way from Barcelona, Dr. Oriol, who, as I said, is a global expert on CBDCs and blockchain. And he will talk about the opportunities for blockchain and digital currencies in the context of Islamic fintech. Dr. Oriol, the floor is yours. I think, Mohammed, you may have to stop sharing your screen, or there's something coming on the screen. So Kartika, maybe we can just clear up the screen so that Dr. Oriol can upload his presentation.
Yes, Mr. Malik.
Recording in progress.
Actually, actually applying blockchain to Islamic finance and banking would be a great match in the sense that, as you know, one of the principles of Islamic finance is that of trying to avoid garar, that idea of uncertainty. Islamic finance tries to avoid this idea of uncertainty as much as possible, because it is against the idea of speculating, etc. So in that sense, the very own features and characteristics of blockchain might actually be a great match for Islamic finance. So more and more banks in the Islamic world are adopting blockchain technology. It's not just something that applies in a theoretical level, but also on a practical level. It's been applied for a few years. For example, as early as 5 years ago, major Islamic banks such as ICI Bank and Emirates NBD began researching the blockchain's capabilities to reduce transactional costs. And for example, 4 years ago in 2017, Emirates Islamic Bank became the first Islamic bank to use blockchain technology, namely for fraud prevention. As I said before, blockchain offers an ideal solution for Islamic bankers because it can reduce costs and make general transactions and processes much more faster, transparent, and efficient. And right now I'm going to select a few use cases where I think that the application of blockchain in Islamic banking might be interesting and beneficial for the industry. One of them is, of course, that of smart contracts, which is not just belonging to Islamic finance. Smart contracts belongs to banking in general, but it can be applied to Islamic banking as well. As you know, smart contracts are self-executing contracts, which, or should I say, with the terms of the agreement between buyer and seller being directly written into the lines of the code. They permit trusted transactions and agreements to be carried out among disparate anonymous parties without the need for a central authority, legal system, or external enforcement mechanism. Smart contracts offer many benefits, but one of them undoubtedly is that idea of automation. It is interruption-free, no third party can make changes. So as you can see, there are many advantages behind smart contracts. When it comes to the exact application of those smart contracts in Islamic finance, we can see that, for example, smart contracts can be used to reduce that element of uncertainty, which is an idea that I mentioned before as well, that idea of trying to avoid that garar, that uncertainty. Smart contracts can as well reduce those costs by applying this self-executing system, mainly because that decentralized nature of smart contracts allow us to have a faster and lower execution costs when applying smart contracts to this area. So you can see here some applications for smart contracts, which are most of them quite common. I'm sure that you already know all of them, but still, digital identity, financial security, trade finance, financial data recording, insurance, escrow, mortgages, trading, the typical ones. And as I said before, they offer many benefits, such as, for example, they are always accurate, they are fast, they are cost-effective, they are autonomous, and they are secure. One second use case where applying blockchain in Islamic finance might be interesting is that of zakat collection and distribution, which is, as you know, one of the pillars of Islam. Using blockchain might make this whole process much more auditable, immutable, and trackable, which means that in theory, this process could be perfectly traced from A to Z, from beginning to end, making it all become much more transparent. I don't mean by that this process is not transparent right now. I just mean that blockchain might make this process even more efficient and transparent. One more use case would be that of sukuk. As you know, sukuk plays a huge role when it comes to its importance in Islamic capital markets. Actually, its market share is rapidly increasing throughout the world. So using blockchain for issuing sukuk can actually help to reduce its costs and make this sukuk issuance process much more transparent and effective. As was proven, for example, in the first issuance of Sukuk Blossom Finance, which received actually a wide range of acceptance globally. Actually, this involves Indonesia as well. the first primary sukuk issuance on a public blockchain was performed by an Indonesian Islamic microfinance corporation known as BMT Bina which successfully raised around 50,000 US dollars. So in here you can see how this might work in practice. I'm not going to dwell on this for much longer, but I just wanted to share this so you could have like a quick idea of this whole process of how blockchain might prove to be successful in this area. One more area is that of wakaf, which, as you know, I mean, it's kind of related to zakat, but it's not the same, no? So blockchain could be used as well in that area. There is, for example, I mean, there are certain examples that I mentioned here, like that from Fintera, but the whole idea is actually the same, no? I mean, making this process much efficient, much more transparent through the use of blockchain and smart contracts in this area. One more area, this one is not just related to Islamic finance. It can be applied to the area of traditional finance as well, but still I think it is worth mentioning this one, is that of trade finance, which, as you know, refers to those financial transactions where financial institutions provide credit to guarantee an exchange of goods. As you know, this is still a very paper-based process. I mean, trade finance has not changed much these last decades. Actually, I could say this last century. So applying blockchain in this area might actually help this process become much more efficient as well, and transparent and faster. One more area would be that one of payments, which is actually also of application to traditional banking and finance as well. Same idea applies to clearance and settlement systems. And note, please, that I'm skipping those because these last ones are actually not just particular to the area of Islamic finance and banking. Some challenges in this area, in the area of applying blockchain in Islamic finance, would be the idea of Sharia compliance. I mean, as you know, every Islamic financial institution needs to ensure Sharia compliance of any new technology or mechanism. So we need to make sure, or should I say, those institutions need to make sure that applying blockchain, or maybe I should say through the application of blockchain, they are not compromising, any Sharia principle. I mean, it shouldn't be like that, but see, I mean, there needs to be like this whole compliance process, as it happens with any new application like being applied. I mean, same idea applies, for example, when trying to use artificial intelligence, that idea of Sharia compliance. So before moving to the area of takaful insurance, let me make a quick reference to cryptocurrencies. I know this is a wide and ongoing debate on the Islamic finance area. I talked before about how blockchain can be applied to banking, to Islamic banking in general, but as you know, one of the many applications of blockchain, and actually perhaps the most famous one, is that of cryptocurrencies. So Islamic scholars have a mixed perspective regarding cryptocurrencies. I mean, some scholars think it is permissible, halal, whereas some others think it is not permissible, haram. I mean, the views are actually quite different. So you should read many papers, from many scholars to actually come to your conclusion. And even in that case, I mean, I would say that there is no single answer to that one. This is actually an ongoing academic and practical debate. There is, for example, one author, and as I said before, if you want to have an external, a deeper approach to those sources or everything, please feel free to reach out to me after this talk. But a research by Yosef suggested that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others could be considered permissible in certain scenarios, such as in the case of currency exchange for making payments of services or goods. So, I mean, the idea that Yosef pointed out was that acquiring cryptocurrencies, I mean, in order to make payments, should be halal, whereas acquiring them as a way to speculate, as an investment asset class just for those speculation purposes, should be regarded as haram. So this is one theory behind that. Alam and other authors discussed in a paper from 2 years ago that cryptocurrencies can be permissible and even supported by governments if the negative aspect of them can be overcome. So, for example, if a cryptocurrency can provide some certainty and stability of exchange value, protection or surety from abuse of the cryptocurrency, such as usage in fraudulent activities, that it can be accepted as Islamic cryptocurrencies. Then there was a different Islamic interpretation from Sharia advisor Mufti Muhammad Abu Bakr, who used to be the former advisor to Blossom Finance, who argued that Bitcoin is permissible under Sharia law. He thought that, or he said that even though some arguments say that crypto itself is speculative, this view actually could be applied to all currencies or even to all assets, no? Because all of them can actually have like this speculative element, and this doesn't automatically deem cryptos as haram. So as you can see, the theories behind the cryptocurrencies in Islamic finance are many. I mean, it is not possible for me to tell you that they are like halal or haram. It pretty much depends on each author from an academic perspective. And when it comes to the practical world, it's going to depend, of course, on each and every government to decide how they tackle this issue. We, for example, are, reading these days about India. No, I mean, India, which is thinking, as far as I know, about banning or being more restrictive towards cryptos. Other countries are like actually thinking the opposite. So at the end of the day, it's going to depend on each government and country. You know? But it's good, of course, to keep track of the latest academic theories in that area. And before finishing in just a few minutes, let me talk about the area of insurance, takaful. So as you know, takaful is different from traditional insurance in the sense that it's based on voluntary contributions to the risk pool. So as you can see, it's quite different from traditional insurances. And well, I mean, once again, we get back to the idea of uncertainty, garar. No, I mean, it is considered that the uncertainty of insurance is too excessive due to the ambiguous nature of future events and the likelihood of perceived risks that may occur. So that's why that idea of takaful is different. The authors think that takaful offer an alternative form of insurance in which the insurer helps policyholders to provide loss protection service for each other in a cooperative risk-sharing manner. So the thing is, though, I mean, fintech can actually play a role in takaful. These two authors, for example, mentioned the potential use of big data analytics and robo-advisory in assisting takaful operators. So when talking about robo-advisory, they mentioned that since it is a computer program, robo-advice does not have self-interests, desires, or hidden agendas. Therefore, its recommendations and decisions come up with a certain objectivity. You know, they are unbiased because they have like no intention, no like hidden desires. No, so that's why, according to the authors, it might be interesting to apply robo-advisory or robo-advisors to takaful operators. The same idea. They think that applying big data might also be useful when it comes to product development, pricing, and the writing stage of insurances. So, however, the thing is, okay, I mean, yes, these authors mentioned this that robo-advisory can be like useful in this area. They also mentioned that not about big data. I mean, and that's actually great, no, because we see possible applications. But going like to the very beginning of the idea, the thing is that the takaful area is kind of in crisis. No, it is in crisis because unlike other areas in Islamic finance, which are thriving, I mean, we talked about sukuk before, etc. Takaful does not represent a large share in the Islamic finance market. I mean, for example, while the Islamic banking sector represents 71% of the global Islamic finance industry, takaful only represents like a tiny 1.3% of it. As you can see, I mean, it's actually a very tiny, very small amount. So it is considered that takaful is yet to become a reality for the vast majority of Muslims worldwide. So we can say to some extent that despite being an attractive industry, it is still kind of in crisis. And that's why I consider, and many authors as well, that fintech can actually not just help, but even save that area of takaful. And that's actually something that was analyzed by this author, Germán Rodríguez Moreno, in his paper, Can Fintech Save Takaful, where he made an exercise of trying to analyze how fintech could actually save this area by focusing on one practical example, that of the operator FWU Takaful GmbH, a company registered in Germany, but whose operations actually encompass many countries in the world, including the United Arab Emirates, etc. I'm not going to dwell on this practical example for longer, which is available online, or I can share with you afterwards. But I just wanted to mention it so you could have this idea. Now, this company basically started to thrive, it's existed for many years, this company, but they started to do much better when they introduced this Philos tool into the Takaful market. So basically, when they started to use fintech-based solutions for Takaful. And that's pretty much all. The conclusion would be that, as I said before, that first of all, applying blockchain in Islamic finance and banking is actually not any kind of there is no contradiction, no problem in that. I mean, it is perfectly possible. It's actually beneficial because it allows for processes to be much more faster, efficient, and transparent. Then I talked about cryptocurrencies, and I mentioned that, cryptos in Islamic finance and banking were hard to classify in the sense that some authors think they are halal while some others think they are haram. So it's an ongoing debate. Any ideas are welcome. And last but not least, I talked about insurance, Takaful, and I concluded by saying that this industry is not at its best, but at the same time, applying fintech to it might actually prove to be very helpful, as proven by some practical examples. So sorry for going so fast, but thank you very much for your time, for attending the talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oriol, and this was fabulous, 90 minutes of a global masterclass in Islamic fintech. We heard so many perspectives. We heard from Africa and the role of non-traditional finance and what is driving the younger generation with a large Muslim population. We heard from Indonesia. We heard about various fintech models and capital markets from Dr. Dalal. And then we really deep dived into blockchain and cryptos from an Islamic fintech lens. So I know we are running a bit late, but we try and manage within time. I have quite a few questions, but in the interest of time, let's first try and take the audience Q&A, and then we'll go to my question so that we are fair to the audience. Is that okay, Kartika?
Yes, Mr. Malik.
Okay. So the first question comes from Geeta, and I know Ali, you've answered it, but let me put it out to anybody who wants to answer it. And perhaps Dr. Dalal, you can answer it. Ali has already done that. So what do you think about the Indonesia Sharia Fintech ecosystem as compared to your country? And if it is not developed enough based on your experience, what do you think is the major source of the issue?
Thank you, Malik. I think this is a very good question. I think in the previous presentation by Muhammad was very actually comprehensive with the developments that have happened in Indonesia. That's quite interesting. As I mentioned, few products have already been tested in the market, which is, for example, Sukuk. Talking about, especially when it comes to the social finance segment, I think in the map I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, a lot of the innovations in this area are coming from Indonesia. And then even the solution I mentioned on Sukuk, using smart Sukuk, that has already been tested also. I think in the previous presentation mentioned Blossom Finance, which has issued the Sukuk governance blockchain. So the one of the interesting aspects is the conducive framework, and that's why I think in the ranking I mentioned in countries, Indonesia ranked among top 4 when talking about the conducive environment for fintechs to prospect. Now, moving forward, and I think the challenge is actually how to further build on this ecosystem to develop opportunities for example, a specific segment that were impacted during the pandemic. And we're talking globally about post-pandemic. recovery efforts, and also how to address other, national priorities when it comes to, for example, achieving sustainable development goals. We are approaching the 2030 deadline for the SDGs, and then of course all the other commitments under the Paris Agreement. So there are still tremendous financing needs to support all of these objectives, and having fintechs contribute to that is very important. The challenges is actually the diversification. As I mentioned, we still see a lot of potential when it comes to the Islamic capital markets, but also when it comes to takaful solutions, and on the regtech and insurtech sectors, actually with more innovative solutions, and perhaps more synergies with the Islamic social finance sector. As I mentioned, it's not only about charity, the traditional donations, whether through zakat or awqaf, but I think one of these, and this is a structural issue that is global, it's not only specific to Indonesia, is how can we modernize these institutions to revive perhaps some of their ethical values that used to serve, the economic development and then social development in general for centuries. We're looking at the Islamic civilization and all, and we've seen that through, for example, some of these structures looking into beyond, the awqaf assets. How can these be used as a source of finance? You can perfectly use awqaf sukuk, and then you can also use, why not, green awqaf sukuk potentially. The awqaf ministries are one of the richest ministries globally. I think their key asset is the size and the value of the assets they own. And in some countries, it also extends to agricultural land, to residential properties, etc. And you can perfectly integrate sustainability objectives in these. Think about, for example, why not integrating energy efficiency solutions when it comes to awqaf assets. We've seen some countries like Morocco, for example, they've implemented a green mosques program, and that would look at into integrating energy efficiency solutions when it comes to clean energy, but also water efficiency. There's a lot of use of, for example, water for ablutions and all in these institutions. So we need more innovation. And I think another question was to, among the segments that really suffered during the pandemic are SMEs, because again, we still don't have enough solutions in a number of countries, including, of course, in Indonesia, for the various, operational activities when it comes to the SME. So obviously, at the beginning, you do need incubation and, accelerators to promote, developing their activities. And in Qatar, for example, we've developed the Qatar Fintech Hub that promotes, supports, a cohort of, fintechs, and then they promote them with the incubation and acceleration programs and financing needs, etc., including a number of initiatives or incentives to address or to start their business. But once the business has started, you have a number of challenges, like, for example, solutions for working capital management. In conventional markets, you have a number of fintechs providing solution when it comes to securitizing receivables. I know that's controversial from a Sharia perspective because you cannot trade or securitize debt, but you could find room for other innovative solutions that are perfectly Sharia compliant, that allows SMEs to find the necessary financing to run their operations. And of course, you can, there are some platforms that offer also using AI technology to also increase the number of loans that could be disbursed, for example, to the clients of those institutions in a relatively very fast way as compared to, the traditional solutions. We also need more solutions when it comes to credit analysis. And for this, you can use AI solutions perfectly, because one of the key challenges are the high default rates when it comes to peer-to-peer lending. I think there was a question about that as well. Is one of the challenges is that peer-to-peer lending can be sometimes very risky. And therefore, you need some alternatives in terms of digital solutions that allow you to have a more, I would say, credit scoring mechanism that is also efficient, but that allows you to screen potential clients using additional criteria. And we've seen some examples in the conventional market as well. The sukuk market, yes, it is very promising. Again, retail sukuk Indonesia has been pioneering the retail sukuk market, so they do have the experience and the infrastructure. It is now how to just scale it up to more solutions. And in fact, what you're doing is you're making your citizens contribute to building their countries. And contributing to infrastructure financing, which is fantastic. If you add to that sustainability consideration, then you're thinking about impact, but you're also promoting sustainable impact, impact and the achievement of sustainable development in general. And perhaps this should be the focus, moving forward of the Indonesian government.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dalal. You covered many points and some key takeaways as I saw it, and a synopsis. One is, of course, from a government and policy support side, coming up with clearer policy and regulations around these. The other, which I think you spoke quite articulately in your presentation as well, is innovative business models. The third is around social challenges, social fintech, sustainable finance, the things that the world today is headed towards at a macro level, whether it is in terms of the COP26 and emission reduction or green bonds or carbon credits, many areas which we obviously don't have time to go into details of those, but essentially how do you tie in sustainable finance, social finance, innovative fintech models and newer technologies like machine learning and smart contracts, and weave it together with a very maybe a very supportive policy landscape. So that's excellent, Dr. Dalal, and that's more from the supply side and the policy side. But there are 2 or 3 more questions on this topic, so I want to press on a little further with you and our other panelists as well. We have Nadia Nurul Iza talking about why is it that conventional fintech still dominates. Then Shelara Sati says, we have 90% Muslim here, but fintech is not really Islamic fintech is not taking off, same in Africa. So I think the supply side part you've articulated very well from a big picture scholarly perspective and also the opportunities. But and this is something Mohammed also covered in his presentation about Islamic fintech literacy and education. So my question to all 3 of you or all 4 of you, whoever wants to take it, is while we understand the opportunities on the supply side and business model transformation, what can we do to drive up demand on the demand side of things? Because it seems that despite many good things being available, people are not just taking to it, whether it is, I don't know, inertia, normal behavior, there is lack of knowledge or no incentive to change or many other things. And frankly, this is not the first time we are seeing a challenge of adoption in any new innovation or business model or fintech. Probably 15 years or 20 years back, people used to say, or even till about 5 years back, people used to say the same thing about digital payments, and look what happened after the pandemic. So this is a question which is open to everybody. Ali, I know you raised your hand, so do you want to go first?
Yes, let me go first. I think one of the, let me rephrase my initial thoughts. First, we need to look at conventional banking and look at the regulatory and policy side. Despite the uptake of fintech across the world, but I think one of the most important issues to deal with as far as fintech is concerned is not about the product development side or whether people are going to uptake fintech products or not. The issue really is how is the regulatory framework structured? And you are starting to see a lot of roadblocks happening where fintech is concerned. And I think the roadblocks are not mostly about whether fintech is good or bad. I think the roadblocks are around whether policymakers, regulators, and consumers really understand where fintech is going. So there is an education gap, I believe, that needs to be addressed. There is an issue where incumbents look at fintech as a potential threat. So they look at it and try and not cooperate with fintechs. And we are seeing a lot of that happening across Africa. In Asia, we are seeing the situation happening. If you look at China, for example, and how China is reacting to fintechs from a policy and regulatory perspective, those kind of conversations are obviously overflowing into the rest of the world. Funding is another issue. Despite the fact that there is a lot of growth in funding for fintechs, there's still a lot more to be done. So quite a number of things are coming together to impede the growth of fintech. Policy and regulatory frameworks, funding, education. But I think the train has left the station, and we are going to see a tremendous growth in fintech across the world, both traditional and Islamic. Thank you, Malik.
Thank you, Ali. And that's an interesting perspective, perhaps more valid in the context of certain countries than you gave the example of China, but maybe China is a more mature and advanced example, because for about 10 years, they let the entire fintech and digital payment industry and wallets grow without or with very minimal regulations, and perhaps their approach is let it grow and then we will regulate. Other countries, especially the West, say, okay, first we put regulations in place and let it grow. And I think in all fairness and based on whatever I have seen, I do want to give a shout out to OJK, to Patriono. I don't know if he's there on the call or not, his team, Kartika. They have done a tremendous job of putting together conducive, supportive policies since about 2018, 2019, and Pasukarela before that in his fintech role. So one, as I said, is of course on the policy side of things, and some regulators are now tightening, but others, and we had this Oriol mentioned about India banning crypto. In fact, there is just a news coming out a while back that the finance secretary has said that private cryptos will not be considered legal in any form at all. So there are extremes of certain societies which are clamping down, but many others who have tried to put together a balanced, nuanced framework. And I do see Indonesia in that context, and perhaps Muhammad would agree with me because he runs the association, so he deals more closely with the stakeholders, OJK, Bank Indonesia, etc. But I come back, and this is again, I'll extend my question. So one is, we heard Muhammad talk a lot about we've heard financial literacy challenges before, but now he articulated something even more specific about Islamic fintech literacy. So is it a question of enlightening people and telling people about the advantages of Islamic fintech, or as Dr. Dalal said, trying to simplify what products or solutions can help their lives, and apart from being embedded with and aligned with their faith, because Indonesia is 90% Muslim. The other interesting question I saw here, which was related to this, this is from Mary, and this was specifically to Muhammad, but I'll again open it to anybody and everybody who wants to answer. If we talk about financial or Islamic fintech literacy, I have two questions here. One is from Mary. Should Sharia fintech be actually taught from a school level? And while we teach, STEM and math and science, etc., is it time to start teaching them about money, but in a different way? So is that one of the solutions? Catch them young. The other thing, which again I want to ask all of you and Ali as well, Oriol, you actually did a great job of articulating the where crypto stands in the Islamic fintech scheme of things. And I know there is no easy answer to that question, but Whether we looked at the Africa demographics as Ali showed, or Indonesia demographics as Mohammed showed, we understand clearly that the majority of the population is young millennials, and in 5 to 10 years, they will be the people in the workforce, they will be the earning population, they will be the population which will consume financial services and fintech. And we've seen this generation behave very differently from our generation. And I'm using that very loosely, but I'm assuming that you, Oriol, Muhammad, Dr. Dalal, Ali, myself, we are all of the same age group. And then you have the millennials like Kartika, the younger ones who probably see the world very differently from us. So, Islamic fintech or Islamic finance or traditional finance, we see money in a very different way, as in a more responsible way. Money is something we take seriously by default, right? And there is, we try to do good with it, we try to be judicious and prudent with it, and so do the regulators. But you see this younger generation, which I think all the speakers spoke about, they think in terms of social. They are all, in their social networks and on Instagram, etc., for a larger portion of their time, and we all understand it. For them, even money and finance has become gamified, and especially in the last 2 years since the pandemic, we saw a complete explosion of this, if I may say so. I don't know how many of you track what's happening in many of the markets, especially the US markets, but this whole meme stock mania, as they call it, and gamification of finance, and now even within cryptos, meme coins, meme currency. So my point is, without getting into too many specifics, our generation saw money as a serious thing. This generation sees everything as a game, gamified, and including money. So their concept of money itself is very different from how we look at it. So combining those two questions of whether we should try and introduce Islamic fintech education in school when we teach ethics and moral sciences, etc., should we start teaching them this as well? Is that a solution? And how do you bring elements of Islamic fintech in a way that this generation understands and appreciates and relates to it, from a gamified or a gamification of money perspective? So I'll open this to everybody. Mohammed, since that question was specifically asked to you, maybe you can go first, and then whoever wants to go, kindly raise your hand.
Okay, thank you, Malik, and thank you, Mary, for the question. So, okay, let me address two things. When we are talking about how to drive demand, and we are, of course, talking about the market, we are now in a position where the market, especially I'm talking about Indonesian market, mostly doesn't understand about what feedback is. Okay, what they know is I have my own problem and who can solve my problem. Okay, so that's the point. And when we are talking about fintech, how to educate the market about what fintech is, we need to give them a clear understanding how fintech can help solve their problem and how safe it is, and how to choose the licensed provider instead of unlicensed provider, because that's the issue that we are facing in Indonesia. We have number of unlicensed fintech providers way bigger compared to the license, and that's the one that created a mess in the market. Thus, that brings a bad reputation about what fintech is. So if we are talking about fintech, the common people in Asia, they are thinking, okay, they have the bad reputation compared to the bank. Okay, so the second thing is how we give a clear knowledge about what Islam economy is. What is the noble? What is the the noble values of Sharia economic system? That's the point. We need to give a clear information to the people, especially to the youngsters in Indonesia, that if you are thinking to create an impact, this is the path. Okay, because when we are talking about Islamic economy, we are talking about something that purely aligned to the human interest. human related things. Okay, if you are talking about how to build a green economy, being honest, avoid greed, this is what Islam economy is. Okay, when we are talking to youngsters, they are talking about, okay, I need something that give a lot of impact to the society. This is one of the paths that those youngsters can start with. Okay, so my short conclusion is, I think if we want to go to the school, for example, today, we will see that the Islamic things teach by the teacher in school, actually, Islam is only about praying, and it's only about wudu. That's it. Even though that's, when we are talking about Islam, this is something that very big. We are talking about muamalah, how doing the business clearly, how following the Islam, relating how you manage your money, how to get your money, how to use your money. This is all is already available in the Islam. And this is how we need to convey this information into the school. So yes, I agree that we need to bring this subject into the school, of course, with some modification to meet their needs. So I need to to clarify that we need to bring this information, this knowledge to the school about what fintech, what kind of problem that people are facing that fintech can solve, and what Islam and what's Islam economy, what fintech, what's Sharia fintech, what Sharia banking is, and so on. So that's my point, Malik, to Mary.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And that was actually very beautifully said. You are absolutely right that the younger generation is looking at sustainability, impact, making a difference, including the way they purchase, the way they bank, they do all their transactions. So the simple idea is of taking them back to their roots in a sense, and kind of making them understand about the ethical principles of Islam, and how issues like trust, fairness, compassion, supporting others, creating a more equitable and fair society, all of those things are seamlessly woven into the ethics of Islam, and that's what Islamic finance is. So and even environmental protection, right? All of these things are things which we all know, at least as Muslims, that the Prophet has said at some different points. So the idea is you have to basically marry their desire for change, for making the world a better place, with kind of raising awareness that using or being a part of the Islamic economy and the Islamic fintech economy allows them a more seamless path towards making an impact. And then of course you can bring in elements of gamification or smart contracts or business model innovation, as Dr. Dalal said, etc. And I know, Dr. Oriol, you wanted to share, and then you of course are our scholar on all things crypto and blockchain from an Islamic fintech lens as well. So please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. No, basically, I mean, following what Muhammad said and Mary's question, I just wanted to say that, at least to me, I feel like there is a lack of education, of available courses, not just in Islamic fintech, but in general in fintech, no, I mean, globally. I mean, it is true that this is being addressed right now. I mean, there are like many universities, training centers like offering courses, Oxford HKU, SUSS, CFA. I mean, there are many who are trying to solve this, but still, I mean, I feel like there is a clear lack of available options. I mean, actually, most faculties, business faculties, like economics faculties, are lagging behind this. I mean, it is still quite common, unfortunately, to see people graduating from economics or even management who keep learning the traditional macroeconomics topics, micro, etc., and so forth and so on. But then they don't actually get to learn anything from about like blockchain, artificial intelligence, and to me that's a huge mistake, no? Because I mean, it is true that you need to understand how the economics work in general, but at the same time, not understanding nowadays how like fintech works or virtual banking or blockchain. That's a huge gap, you know. So I think that it is true that there is a gap, a lack of education perhaps in Islamic fintech, but at the same time, that gap actually applies to the whole area of fintech, no? So I think that both of them should be addressed, and it can actually be done in parallel, no? Because it is actually perfectly possible for any university, no, to start offering like general fintech courses whilst offering the more Islamic finance oriented ones. To me, that lack of education is causing less demand, you know? It's affecting the demand side to the point that it's actually quite common. I mean, we all read like every day about you know, fintech or crypto, like on probably like all the media, you know, because everyone is talking about that like all over the world. But at the same time, when you start and look at what's written about these topics, I mean, it's true that many journalists are like I mean, experts and they know a lot about that, but at the same time, it is perfectly possible to see some kind of misinformation being like repeated over and over again. You know, I mean, just to cite an example, in one of my areas of interest, CBDCs, it is perfectly like possible and common to see people referring to them as cryptos. And also, there are like many confusions that I feel like if there were like a much easily available education in that area, we would kind of avoid these mistakes. And at the same time, by avoiding these mistakes, we would like make sure that like everyone, well, knows how to deal with these areas, because I mean, there is nothing wrong about fintech, but some people might still be scared because you read about this or that scam. That's actually a minority of cases when it happens, no? But I mean, people, I think if they were like a bit more educated, thanks to getting like an easier access to these courses, would be like well, more maybe prone to use those fintech services or even the Islamic fintech ones, in our case.
Thank you, Dr. Oriol. Very well articulated. And I'm glad to say that when you speak about academics and scholars and them being, rounded from a 360-degree learning perspective, we at least are fortunate to have Dr. Dalal here, who's an associate dean and who definitely does not fit the mold of a traditional educator. She understands all these topics quite well. So we are, fortunate to have at least one of the more open-minded educators in our midst. And I know, Dr. Dalal, you had raised your hand. So if there's something you want to add, please go ahead, and then we'll go to Ali.
Sure. Thank you, Malik. No, I think these are very valid points, but I think we should distinguish three things. So when it comes to, sometimes there's a lack of trust in the platform itself. So I think in the questions why Islamic fintechs are not developing and not scaling up their activities. So sometimes, as I think Mohammed mentioned, is that you have many fintechs out there. Some are licensed, some are not licensed, etc. And that's actually the regulatory oversight is very important to provide that confidence and into the market and to create that trust in the system itself. So therefore, you will attract more customers and more investors. And perhaps, through more reporting, you have again on the regulatory side a database of licensed institutions, etc. So that provides more, transparency to investors and customers. On the demand side, we should distinguish, I think, between customers who are looking for solutions. We mentioned the examples of SMEs, but you have many other examples of, senior citizens. You have the millennials, etc., who have completely different expectations in terms of the solutions they're looking for. And then you have the investors, and this is what you also want to attract. This is a very important segment because this is what helps you also raise financing for your investments. And I think Islamic fintech should think about universal solutions. It's not only about Islamic that comply with, Sharia principles. Of course, that's basic and that's very important. But in developing any solutions, they should think about universal solutions that cater for the needs of any other segments. And I'm thinking particularly about a very growing investor base of impact investors. Today, if you look at the size of the impact investing market, just in 2020, that's about $715 billion, and that is growing. So if your solution is universal, it has impact, you have tools to demonstrate your impact, you have the transparency, the traceability, your solution is competitive, then I don't think you should be, it doesn't matter whether it's Islamic or not, you still have demand for it. And that is very important because a lot of the Islamic institutions or fintechs or startups, they focus too much on the Sharia compliance, but they think that that's enough to attract customers, which is not, because a large segment of the customers do arbitrage between the solutions. So if the solution is not competitive enough, it doesn't appeal to their needs, no matter whether it's Islamic or not, it will not work. So that's very important for scaling up the activities of startups. And in terms of the demand, of course, you need to cater for the various needs, and you need to understand very well the market you are operating in. You mentioned the millennials, they want fast, competitive, easy to use solutions, digitalized solutions. So yes, you have to provide them with these solutions, but you have also other segments, the senior citizens who wants the face-to-face contact, who wants to be confident that their money is well managed, etc. That's their pension, etc. So it is very important to take into consideration as well all of these, aspects. The training, I agree with you. I think it's time now. Even educational programs and all are. We're also living the new normal when it comes to academia. And we have, for example, at HBK, we just revised our programs to integrate fintech, sustainability, etc. Because again, our clients are the market. So the millennials who will be potentially supporting the industry moving forward. So they need to be equipped with certain skill set. And the way you do it is also not the traditional knowledge sharing way, but you also use technology. And we're talking also about EdTech when it comes to education. So that's the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dalal. You covered three things: the demand side, the investor perspective, and change of education or EdTech. So let me quickly recap and share some summaries before we go to Ali. So I think definitely on the customer side, one major issue is trust, and Mohammed also mentioned it. We saw this earlier in China with P2P lending and recently in Indonesia as well. And I do believe that along with the regulators like OJK, there is a very important role of the industry associations like what Mohammed does, or the crowdfunding association in Indonesia. I am fortunate to count all these leaders as my friends, but they're doing an excellent job. So a lot of this buffering will have to come by these industry bodies, industry associations acting as self-regulatory organizations, because Patriora and his team only have so much bandwidth, right? Unless they set up a 200-member team, it's very difficult to control, regulate, or track a large industry and growing industry in a country like Indonesia. So that is very well taken, and I just wanted to kind of articulate the role and the important role of what the fintech associations play. And Indonesia definitely has one of the more active fintech associations, as we can see from today's event. On the investor side, I think that's a great perspective as well, and perhaps Oriol, and Mohammed, that's an interesting idea for us to discuss offline, of how to create smart contract based solutions which can look at compatibility with not just Sharia fintech principles, but even impact investment, as Dr. Dalal said again and again, and how can we automate it. So everything from clean energy to carbon credits. Perhaps there's a business model waiting for some of us to go out there and replicate. Ali, you are most welcome to join as well. We can create a global solution. And the third thing again is on the education side. Both Dr. Dalal and I do wear the hat of an educator as well. So it's really fascinating as an educator myself, and I know Oriol, you teach partly as well, and I've invited you as a guest teacher. So there is definitely a need to, we're doing it at the higher education level. I think the need is to now introduce it perhaps at more introductory levels. When we talk about STEM, this has to be embedded, and Mohammed, you and the association can play an important role. I was fortunate last couple of years back that I worked on two national policy papers quite closely. With OJK, I was one of their international experts that they had invited, and this was done in partnership with the IFC, World Bank, and other global agencies. So the idea of embedding it into education is something which, again, I must commend Indonesia. They had thought about it and implemented it back in 2018 and 19, and look at whom they've appointed as their education minister. I think that itself says a lot. So something for us also to learn and take away from Indonesia. We are here not only to share with them, but also to learn from them. Ali, you had something to add, please go ahead.
So I have 3 points to make. My first point is about regulation and policy. First, my I come from the school of thought that not everything needs to be regulated. That's number one. Number two, for fintechs across the world, they must demand or ask respectfully for a seat at the table when policy is being formulated and regulation is being formulated. And this brings me to my favorite analogy I like to talk about. If you don't have a seat at the table, then anything can happen. So my analogy is, you walk into a restaurant, you have three choices. The first choice, you are a waiter, somebody who is serving other people as they are eating. That's choice number one. Choice number two, you are sitting at the table, eating with everybody else. That's obviously the best choice. But if you don't do these two, you have a third choice, which basically puts you nowhere in the frame of things. And that third choice is you are on the menu being eaten. You must, this is one of the things that as an association, both from a Kenyan perspective and as a member of the executive board of the Africa FinTech Network, we keep on talking to entrepreneurs, to FinTech players. Do not be on the menu being eaten. And the best way to have a seat at the table is to join associations. I think Mohammed Ismail has really articulated that well. And I would really hope that we take an example of that. I seem to have frozen. Not sure whether you can hear me.
We can hear you, but your screen is frozen, so please go ahead.
All right, great. Number two is around the younger generation. Now we talk about millennials and we talk about Gen Zs. You guys have not engaged with Gen Alpha. And now we can say what we want to say about them. They're irresponsible, they're whatever, but I want to remind all of us here that we were once referred to as millennials and Gen Zs and Gen Alphas. So the best we can do is understand them and work with them to create a better world. We cannot continuously dismiss them and say they're not doing things right. They are our children. They are our small brothers and small sisters. So we need to take cognizance of that. My last point is more of a socio-economic perspective that I strongly believe that FinTech can take care of by ensuring that we are spreading goodwill and we are spreading economic benefit to the larger ummah, as we call it in Arabic and Swahili, the larger Muslim community across the world. And FinTech can play a great role in reducing radicalization of Islam, creating a bad perspective and a bad outlook about our great religion. And I think as a community, we should stop talking about which countries we are coming from and just think about ourselves as the Muslim Ummah and how can we come together as a global FinTech community to accelerate Sharia FinTech. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. On that uplifting note, I think we've actually slightly exceeded our time. I had many more questions, but we've heard some very interesting perspectives from all the four experts. And let me briefly take a minute or two more, Kartika, to conclude from our perspective. Since Ali said we should look at a global community, I just want to add that the Global Impact FinTech, or the GIFT Forum, is one of the largest and most inclusive and diverse FinTech forums globally. We have a 65 country footprint where we want to go to 100 by 2022. And our mission and our guiding principles are inclusivity, diversity, impact, using technology, as I keep saying, using technology for good, not greed. And to that extent, we are fortunate that we partner with and we work with, and we have all these experts in our midst, and we work with various industry associations, right from Kenya and Africa to Indonesia to all over the world to Argentina, etc. So there is, we're trying to live that vision of a global community and using fintech and technology to make an impact. So you're all welcome to be a part of this journey and partner with us. I had more questions, and this was an amazing discussion, but the clock is ticking. So let me conclude by saying a heartfelt round of gratitude. Thanks to all these fabulous speakers for how openly they shared their perspectives and knowledge from all over the world, and also the very engaging Q&A that we had, where we covered so many aspects. We could have covered more, and I personally wanted to go deeper into smart contracts and some of the opportunities there, but inshallah another time we shall cover it. With that, our thank you and our appreciation to the Indonesian Fintech Association, the Indonesian Sharia Fintech Association, the Indonesia Crowdfunding Association, and of course to OJK and the team, kind of organizing it, Patriono, Kartika, and everybody involved. Thank you, and we are always happy to support and partner with you. Before we go, Kartika reminds me we need to take a quick picture. So let's put on our cameras and our best faces and smile for this, so that we can have this from memory. Kartika, over to you.
Okay, maybe I will count. We will the screen. So give a big smile, and one, you, Mr. Malik, and all the speakers.
Kartik, I think the screen has frozen and we can't hear you. So I don't know if you've already taken the picture or you want us to continue smiling.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Malik?
Yes.
Yes, we have captured the screen. Thank you very much.
So thank you. I think I've concluded from our end. Kartika, over to you if you want to say any final words. Otherwise, thank you to our audience for all your questions, and till we see you next time.
Thank you to the moderator and all speakers for a very exciting discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for the outstanding panelists and moderators. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's event. We are deeply honored to have all the guests and speakers. We sincerely thank you for the kind support. See you again in the next day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik, and all the speakers.
Kembali lagi bersama petualangan literasi keuangan digital bersama Vin dan Niti. Kali ini mereka berjanji bertemu Sam, teman mereka di toko roti enak. Saat mereka sedang asik memilih roti, tiba-tiba Sam mendapatkan notifikasi SMS dari nomor tidak dikenal. Vin, Nit, aku dapat SMS nih, lihat deh, penawarannya menarik banget. Katanya aku bisa langsung dapat pinjaman besar dengan cepat.
Hati-hati loh Sam, bisa aja itu penipuan. Kayak banyak diberitain di internet. Lihat deh, banyak banget yang udah jadi korbannya. Mulai dari ditagih dengan bunga berlipat-lipat, diteror, dipermalukan di sosial media. Coba aku lihat SMS-nya dulu Sam.
Vin bener tuh Sam, kalau mau aman pinjam-meminjam secara online, lebih baik lihat daftar perusahaan fintech lending berizin di OJK.
Tapi aku kurang paham apa itu fintech lending, Nit. Kelebihannya apa dan gimana proses pendaftarannya?
Fintech lending itu adalah platform layanan jasa keuangan yang mempertemukan pemberi dana atau lender dengan penerima dana atau borrower. Jadi, melalui platform itu, borrower bisa mengajukan pembiayaan dan lender bisa memberikan pembiayaan serta mendapatkan imbal hasil. Nah, kelebihannya ada di kemudahan akses Sam. Gak cuma lewat smartphone aja loh. Ada fintech lending yang juga bisa menjangkau masyarakat yang belum memiliki akses layanan keuangan formal.
Tapi untuk mulai investasi di fintech lending itu pasti mahal ya?
Enggak kok, investasinya bisa mulai dari 100.000. Nanti kamu bisa cek langsung di website atau aplikasi perusahaannya.
Wah, menarik banget ya Nit. Aku bisa langsung cek dari smartphone nih.
Kalau begitu, gimana caranya biar dapat pembiayaan untuk modal usaha baruku, Nit?
Langkah pertama, kita bisa dapat nama-nama perusahaan fintech lending berizin dari daftar yang dikeluarkan OJK. Penting sekali untuk memperhatikan legalitas perusahaan. Bisa juga WA ke OJK di nomor 081 157 157 157. Dari situ, kita bisa mulai masuk ke website atau aplikasi perusahaannya. Kemudian kalau bingung dengan banyaknya layanan, kita bisa pakai agregator yang berfungsi membandingkan layanan berbagai fintech agar kita bisa memilih sesuai kemampuan.
Oh, seperti agregator yang dulu kamu jelasin untuk pilih asuransi itu ya Nit?
Iya Vin, beberapa marketplace dan e-wallet biasanya juga memiliki fitur untuk masuk ke perusahaan fintech lending. Oh iya, untuk tetap memastikan keamanan dan kenyamanan penggunanya, fintech lending banyak bekerja sama dengan penyelenggara inovasi keuangan digital atau fintech lainnya Sam. Misalnya nih, eKYC digunakan saat verifikasi pendaftaran. Saat pengajuan dana, inovatif credit scoring digunakan untuk menganalisa data supaya konsumen yang belum punya riwayat kredit atau rekening bisa tetap dapat pembiayaan. Untuk perlindungan, perusahaan fintech lending bekerja sama dengan penyelenggara layanan insurtech. Untuk alat pembayarannya, bisa menggunakan e-money langsung dari smartphone kita. Pada saat pembayaran, otorisasi dilakukan melalui layanan payment gateway. Gitu Sam, Vin.
Wih, sekarang fintech makin keren ya, Nit. Tapi beneran aman nih kalau kita pakai layanan fintech lending seperti itu?
Aman Sam, asal kita perhatikan beberapa hal, yakni cari perusahaan fintech lending berizin di website OJK dan lihat apakah track record perusahaan cukup bagus. Teliti lagi syarat dan ketentuan layanan masing-masing. Cek juga ada tidaknya perlindungan data pribadi konsumen dan layanan konsumen ya Sam. Tapi ada satu hal yang penting diperhatikan nih. Pastikan lagi kalau kita benar-benar mampu membayar saat mengajukan pembiayaan ya. Nah, dengan tahu tipsnya, kita sebagai pemberi dan penerima dana bisa lebih bijak menggunakan fintech lending dengan aman.
Jadi jelas ya, SMS yang Sam dapat itu termasuk fintech lending ilegal.
Iya Vin, fintech lending ilegal hanya memberikan dampak yang merugikan untuk lender maupun borrower loh.
Wih, ngeri banget ya Nit. Tapi, kalau kita nggak bisa menghindari hal itu, kita bisa lapor kemana nih?
Iya tuh Nit, kalau mau lapor kemana?
Kalau kasusnya terkait perusahaan fintech lending ilegal, bisa lapor ke OJK. Sementara, jika ada masalah dengan perusahaan berizin, kita bisa hubungi layanan konsumen perusahaan tersebut atau lapor ke AFPI, AFTEK, atau OJK.
Oh begitu Nit, thanks ya. Aku jadi belajar banyak tentang fintech lending. Sebagai alternatif pembiayaan modal usahaku, prosesnya mudah, cepat, dan tanpa agunan.
Iya Nit, thanks ya. Aku jadi makin mantap untuk mulai melakukan pendanaan di fintech lending. Sistem keamanannya handal dan bisa dimulai dengan nilai rendah ya.
Sama-sama Sam, Vin. Yuk, buruan cek fintech lending Solusi tepat untuk rencana keuanganmu. Menguntungkan, aman, dan user-friendly loh.
Kembali bersama cerita Vin dan Niti. Dua anak muda ini adalah pengguna aktif internet. Mereka menggunakan internet untuk berbagai keperluan. Dimulai dari keperluan sehari-hari sampai kebutuhan finansial. Namun, mereka tidak sadar bahwa data mereka sangat sensitif dan mudah disalahgunakan untuk kegiatan kejahatan, seperti penipuan atau bahkan pencurian. Gawat, terjadi sesuatu dengan Niti dan laptopnya. Vin penasaran kenapa Niti terlihat cemas.
Ada apa Niti? Kamu terlihat cemas.
Aduh, Vin, kayaknya aku hampir kena tipu nih.
Wah, kok bisa Niti?
Iya, Vin. Tadi aku lihat iklan saya laptop. Aku langsung klik dan login ke website e-commerce langgananku. Pas diklik, langsung minta detail kartu kredit. Nah, tapi aku nggak dapat email konfirmasi sampai sekarang. Pas ku cek lagi, namanya hanya beda 1 huruf sama web e-commerce resminya. Cuman tampilannya mirip banget.
Wah, itu website palsu. Kayaknya kamu baru kena cyber attack, Nit.
Duh, gimana nih, Vin?
Tenang, jangan panik, Nit. Pertama, hubungi bank kamu, cek ada transaksi yang menggantung nggak. Kalau ada, minta dibantu untuk proses pembatalan. Terus, selanjutnya minta blokir dulu sementara kartu kreditmu. Dan minta bukti pelaporan sebagai pelanggan. Pantau terus perkembangannya dan pastiin kartumu benar-benar keblokir. Kalau emang belum, lapor lagi ke bankmu biar bisa diurus. Terus, kalau udah aman, baru deh kamu minta ganti kartu. Ganti juga username dan password email yang terkoneksi buat login ke akun yang dibajak tadi dengan yang baru ya. Terus buat antisipasi, ganti juga semua akunmu lainnya yang punya username dan password sama kayak emailmu tadi.
Wah, makasih, Vin. Untung ada kamu. Kok kamu bisa tahu banyak gini sih?
Iya, sama-sama Nit. Aku tahu lumayan banyak abis sharing sama Bagus, anak bapak ibu kosan yang juga punya toko roti ini. Soalnya kan aku juga baru pakai layanan keuangan digital. Jadi aku cari-cari info dan masih hati-hati pakainya.
Iya, bener juga sih. Aku karena buru-buru jadi nggak fokus. Memang sebagai pengguna layanan keuangan digital, kita harus lebih hati-hati, termasuk resiko cyber ini.
Iya Niti, kita juga harus hati-hati dalam membagikan data kita dan data sensitif lainnya. Nah, apa yang terjadi sama kamu itu namanya web phishing. Penipunya bikin tampilan website kelihatan mirip banget sama web aslinya. Kalau kita nggak jeli dan asal masukin data kita bisa langsung dicuri dan